You hear that, Mr. Anderson? That is the sound of an inevitability. That is the sound of your death. Goodbye, Mr. Anderson. Let's talk. That was a quote from The Matrix, right? And it's my favorite quote from The Matrix. I have so many, as you probably know, The Matrix is my favorite movie, and all of the books that you have to read to be in the Matrix. You know, I've read mythologies and simulacra and simulacrum, and what's the other one? The Psychology of Evolution or whatever it is. But at any rate, read those books. I love it. It's very exciting stuff. And I like that because what the guy's saying, you know, what the agent Smith is saying, the sound of inevitability. He's hearing something, and a train is coming, right? And that's the sound of inevitability. There's a train coming, and I can hear it coming, and you, sir, are going to be under that train, right? Here's my point. Certain things are inevitable. You know, I've had Jody Brower on, and she talks about people saying, I want to go back to the 50s, or I want to go back to the 60s, or all of these presidents. You know, we discussed that. Presidents coming on saying, I'd like to go, I'll take you back to a time. Don't you always love that? I'll take you back to a time when there was good jobs, when there was industrial jobs, back when we had, and everybody had benefits, and there was a chicken in every pot, and blah, 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 right? While we know that they're lying, that they're not going to, that they can't, even if they wanted to, which they don't. But we also know if we did, it would only inevitably lead us right back to where we are now. You know, it would be like you walking down the road for 10 miles and getting somewhere that you don't want to be and say, what do you want to do? I want to go back and start and walk that same road again. It's going to take you to the same place that it would have taken you before. The inevitability. You know what that is? That's the sound of inevitability. Now, why do I say all of that? Because if you look at what's happening now, the US is in quite a bind. Let's look at it. On one hand, they still have a very sick and twisted discussion going on in the collective heads of the leaders of the United States, right? They're talking amongst themselves. They're talking to themselves in the same way that if someone goes to a psychiatrist, one of the things the psychiatrist wants to know is what your internal conversation is. Are you walking around saying, I'm so stupid, I'm so dumb? Some people, it comes out of their mouth. I'm stupid. I'm dumb. Why do I always do that? I'm an idiot. Their internal conversation becomes an external conversation, and it's a very sad conversation. And if you listen to that conversation, you can see how it drives them to the inevitable unhappy life that they're having. They're always telling themselves they're stupid. They're ugly. Haven't you known people who were very attractive who thought they were ugly? And everybody's like, that person's like, oh, I always look terrible. You're like, are you kidding me? You're gorgeous. You're beautiful. You look great. And the person always thinks they're ugly. Or a person who, you know, has body dysmorphia. They think they're fat when they're not fat. All kinds of things. Their internal conversation does not align with reality. People think you're great. You're wonderful. You're a smart person. I'm so stupid. I'm so ugly. Their internal conversation is not aligned with the external reality, with the world that they live in, right? Well, and that internal conversation can drive an external inevitability. I'll give a point. There was a point in my life when, way back when, I was dating a woman that I thought was the cat's pajamas. Man, I thought she was great. But when I dated her, she would say, oh, you're not going to like me. Oh, when you find out how I really am. That was her internal conversation, low self-esteem. When you learn to be around me, you won't like me. You won't think. And I thought the world of her. And at some point, we ended up breaking up. And when I thought back, I thought to myself, I think The driver was her constantly saying that I wasn't going to like her, blah, blah, blah. And she manifested that inevitability, maybe in my head, maybe in her head, maybe in everybody's, but by saying it all the time, her internal conversation was bad. If it had been, darling, one of these days you and I'll be married. We'll have 2.5 kids in a minivan. That could have been the case, but it wasn't. You understand what I'm saying? It was an internal conversation. The internal conversation that you have can drive an inevitability. There are people that are telling themselves, I think I'm going to have this. Have you ever heard of the placebo syndrome? Where a person, of course, I'm sure you have, where they'll have a person and they'll give 10 people a particular medication. And 7 of them, 6 of them, 7 of them will get better. And then find that one of them who got better, 2 of them that got better, didn't even get the medication. They got a sugar pill. Right. And it's like, why is that? Because they believed that sugar pill was going to heal them. And they created that. Their mind created a reality in their body. And their body was like, oh, well, I guess I want to get healed. Oh, well, whatever it is, just went away. Right. It is that internal conversation that they had. They may not have said, I'm going to get better, but they thought internally in their conversation, I'm going to get better. Your internal conversation drives an inevitability, be it good, bad, or indifferent. And a person who has a twisted internal conversation is due to have a twisted outcome. The outcome is not going to align with what they want. Why do I say all of that? Because what we're looking at right now is the inevitability of the crash of empire, the inevitability of the crash of the U.S. empire, one way or the other. And we're personally, because I'm on the ship, I'm hoping it doesn't smack into an iceberg and sink to the bottom. But I understand that that's a possibility, because what we're looking at right now is an empire that says the conversation, internal conversation is screwed up. Number one, we're the best. You ever hear that? They always say that our military is the greatest in the world. Nobody could do the things we did. The things that we've accomplished, nobody could ever accomplish. We've got the most powerful, dynamic military ever in history, the most powerful fighting force that ever lived. Blah, blah, blah. Why do you need to say that? It is like a self-motivation. And really what it is, what we're looking at is the leaders of the country trying to drive that conversation into the people, into the populace. So when they say we're going to go start a war, we're going to fight or whatever, you'll be like, oh, well, we're the most powerful military ever, so it's no big deal. You'll realize that sooner or later you're going to run into, you're going to run into a buzzsaw. Right? It's to lie to you. But if they keep lying to you about how great we can fight, and we can't really fight that great in comparison to the other people that are out there, at some point, there is an inevitability. And you're going to think you can. That's the guy that thinks, I'm the toughest guy in the world. I can beat anybody up. And he goes into a bar and there's some big guys, you piece of crap. Yeah, give me your drink. And he snatches the guy's drink. And yeah, really thinks he's the toughest guy, but he ain't. He's going to get his ass kicked in that bar. He's going to get the crap beat out of him and thrown out the bar. That is inevitability. His actions, he thinks he's tough. He acts like he's tough. He comes in and he tries to, now if that guy's scared, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm scared. This guy's so tough. He's saying he's tough. That could work on some people. What happens when it don't? Inevitability. So what happens? The United States had a devious plan when it comes to Russia. Now, turn this off if you're some kind of Democrat or Republican or something, you believe what you're being told by the government. You might want to turn it off here. But so the U.S., for those who don't understand what was happening in Ukraine, who don't really understand, who didn't read, what's his name, the Polish guy, it was Jimmy Carter's foreign policy guy. He wrote a book called The Grand Chessboard. For those who didn't read The Grand Chessboard and haven't been reading these things, right? The U.S. empire says we have to be the most powerful force on earth. And in order to do that, we've got to destroy Russia. We've got to control Russia. We got to destroy the Russian government, and we've got to control the Eurasian continent because that's huge and it's powerful and it's full of natural resources. Yes, the Big New Brzezinski. Thank you very much. Very smart people in the chat. Zbigniew Brzezinski wrote The Grand Chessboard. For those who think, oh, no, we're just out here standing for democracy, right? Trust me, if you believe that, if you think the U.S. empire is here for, it has 900 bases because they want to stand for democracy, your internal conversation screwed up. But at any rate, but it ain't your fault. It's propaganda. But here's my point. The U.S. Was planning on putting bases around Russia all around base, Russia getting closer to closer to pressure Russia, and at some point overthrow the government and take over Russia. That's what we were going to do to this huge country that's loaded with nuclear weapons. That was never really a good plan, but it was the only plan they had. Give them the benefit of the doubt, right? Well, Russia's a very powerful military force. So it was inevitable that if you have a powerful country that has the ability to defend itself, that you're going to push and push and push, and you have a malevolent plan to steal everything they got, at some point, you're going to run to a point where they're going to say no and you're going to say yes, and it's going to have to be fought out. Some things have to be fought out. Now, because at the same time, there's a number of things going on, and that is the rise of China. China has risen to be just an unbelievable economic power and industrial power, right? Phenomenal power. What that means is when you go after Russia, they got a friend. And their friend is China, and China is going to financially back them. And that's all Russia needed. They just needed a financial backing. And China said, sure, we'll buy all the natural resources you have. They can use them anyway because they have such industry, they can use it. So that keeps Russia afloat. And Russia knows how to take care of themselves. And one thing the Russians know how to do, one thing the Red Army knows how to do, and that's fight. You don't want to get what the old thing, don't bluff Beijing and don't march on Moscow. And the US did both. But at any rate, so the US empire decided we're going to, I don't understand empires, we're going to be the powerful empire forever. We're never going to fall. We're going to rule the world forever and ever and ever. And as is organically happens, other world powers rise. Another world power rose, and that was Russia to China, really a major world power. But Russia is rising really, really quickly. And the U.S. empire is saddled with a number of problems, not the least which being the capitalism that U.S. empire practices quickly morphed into a monopoly capitalism, into a financial capitalism, financialized, so that all the money is made with other money, right? How do you make money? I remember hearing people say, you should be making money in your sleep. And I'm thinking, well, how do you make money in your sleep? Well, that's easy. You invest it here and invest it there, and then the money just rolls over into other money. Well, you know what? That don't work for little guys. It works for big guys with a lot of money. The little ones lose their money doing that. But that is financialization. That is not using capital, using money for productive purposes. It's using it for non-productive purposes. One might use the term fictitious capital. And then guess what? Because the US is the reserve currency, we can just print more. Anytime we run out of that, we spent too much money, print some more. We spent too much, print some more. We spent too much, print some more. And that's what we started doing. Spending all we wanted like a drunken sailor and printing more. And it made it inevitable that when the US was no longer the reserve currency, that we wouldn't be able to print, but we don't know how to do anything else. And what happens when you have unlimited credit cards and then all of a sudden they got a limit on them and you don't know how to deal with credit cards with a limit on them? You're going to keep spending like they were unlimited. And that's what the US has been doing. And the US is like, well, we got to have unlimited credit cards, but we don't. Well, the only way we can have unlimited credit cards is if we bully everybody. If everybody keeps the dollar as the reserve currency, and everybody continues to use the dollar, and all these countries do what we tell us, and they give us their natural resources free. And oh, by the way, China, we can't let them ride. We got to still control everything, which would make sense. It would be easy if it wasn't for the rise of other world powers. So here we sit again, approaching inevitability. We said to Iran, the same with Russia. We're going to destroy you, Russia. The same with Iran. We're going to destroy Iran. Iran's like never bought into that. And here we sit at a point where we've made up every excuse. Well, we want to go after Iran for nuclear weapons, or we want to go after them for whatever, right? For protesters, whatever the case. We've come up with a bunch of cockamamie excuses, and they've all fallen through, and Iran is still standing. And now the inevitability is this: put up or shut up. Now we are at a place, and I thought we were going to get there with Russia, and I thought we were all going to end up nuked because our dear friends in the Democrats are standing up for democracy. We got to stand up against Putin, and we're going to stand up against nuclear weapons, and we're all going to die. But fortunately, that ain't the case. But It's still a possibility. It's always a possibility in a world with nuclear weapons, with a malevolent force like the US empire that's going around the world like a bunch of friggin' pirates trying to steal everything that ain't nailed back down and go back and steal the nails and lying and cheating. And the only people left who don't know how bad the United States is, the only people left on this earth that don't know that the United States is a gangster, is run by common street hoodlums, far worse than common street hoodlums, degenerates and perverts. The only people left that haven't accepted that are the brainwashed cult members in the United States that are all still arguing over whether the Democrats or the Republicans are going to win the midterms. They're still left after these. All the money is spent on war. Your schools are falling to hell. Nobody can afford to buy a house. People can't afford to buy a car. People can't pay their rent. They're living in their vehicles. Professors in California living in their, imagine you making probably 120 grand living in your vehicle because you can't afford a house. In a country like that, tripping over homeless people, cancer, we won't even get into that. There's like a unbelievable like a wave of epidemic of cancer that may or may not be related to the foods that we eat and the drinks that we drink and other things that may have happened over the last couple of years that a lot of us didn't think was a good idea, but others went well ahead with it. We're in a bad spot. And after all of that, you still got people who think we'll be saved if just the Democrats win, or if the Republicans win, or something like that. Why, if just the right party. I got an email from some schlub today who's running for Democrat, a Democrat running for Senate in Maryland, and they were like, yes, I'm standing up. And when I looked at what they had done, it was like, yes, we must stand up to Putin. Oh, really? So people are struggling, and we've got a bunch of politicians who are the only concerned with spending more money for war. That's all they're concerned with. And if you think that one of those two parties is going to somehow bail us out, then you are part of the problem because you're a brainwashed cult member. That's what you are. If you don't know it, cult members don't know they're brainwashed cult members. They think that it's making sense. I had a guy call me on my radio show the other night, last week in DC, saying, well, the problem is, Garland, you don't talk about the Republicans. The problem, and I said, so the problem is the Republicans. Yeah, the Republicans won't do this. And Republicans, oh, okay. I knew. What was the point of me trying to convince somebody who at this time, after all that has been released in the Epstein paper documents, still thinks this is about the Democrats versus the Republicans? Still thinks, why, if just my team is the good guys, and if the good guys win, we'd be great. You can't, again, the internal conversation of our leaders is twisted and sick. And the internal conversation of the brainwashed cult members that think one of these parties is one of these parties rather than the uniparty, rather than they're puppets for the ruling elite, the people that still are left there, their minds are just as twisted, but it ain't their fault. They're victims of propaganda, So here we are, where the US is like, okay, we've attacked countries, small countries, right, for years. Oh, Libya, whatever, Syria, whatever. We're going to take out these small countries, which they were no match for the US because they were small. We beat up on the little guys. And if you remember, when Trump got elected, I said, Trump's this kind of neocon. He wants to beat up on the little countries like Cuba or Venezuela, but he don't want to fight the big boys, right? So now the US empire is racing towards the inevitable corner. I could argue Trump is cornered, but the empire's cornered. The inevitable corner that it would find itself in. The inevitable trap that it would find itself in. And the cheese in the trap is greed. The cheese in the trap is hubris, is arrogance. We are the strongest. We are the toughest. And by the way, we're better than everybody. Entitlement. We're entitled to everything. We're Americans and we're entitled to everything. And look at those little old people in fill in the blank. Cuba, Venezuela, Russia, Iran, China, they're second-rate cultures. Why? Look at our culture. Our culture's the best. We've got McDonald's and iPhones, as if they don't have, they don't want McDonald's. I'll tell you that right now. But here's my point. So all of that hubris, all of that arrogance got us to a point where at some point we walked in the bar and some guy put us to the test. All right, well, I guess we're going to have to fight. And say, give me your drink. And some guy gives us a drink. And that's been going on and on and on for years. We walk in the bar, we look at everybody, say, you give me your drink. And the guy says, here, walks away. At some point, somebody was going to say, no, let's do this. And now here we are where we have a country in Iran that we have pushed. To an extent, we've pushed them into a corner where they have to fight, which is very dangerous. And we just said, okay, Iran, you have to take the deal. You have to take a deal. And we got to do what was a deal, you call it. And even then, let me say this: the JCPOA, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, that was the nuclear weapons deal that Obama signed with the Iranians, and even that was a fraud because the U.S. was supposed to. Excuse me. The U.S. was supposed to drop the sanctions, and we never held up our end of the bargain. We never dropped the sanctions, and it ended up walking away. And by the way, did I mention we have a deal to stop Iran from building nukes is like a deal to stop me from sprouting wings and flying out that window. Hey, Garland, I don't want you to sprout wings and fly out the window. And I'd be like, well, I'm not going to sprout wings and fly out the window. Yeah, you are. And we need a deal to stop you. But I'm not going to wings. No, what? No, God, we need a deal. And we sign a deal and we write a deal. And I'm like, well, hell, I ain't going to sprout wings and go out the window. Sure. Why do I care about signing a deal to do something that I'm not going to do anyway? So the Iranians were like, all right, if it'll get you off my stinking back, I'll sign a deal that says I'm not going to build nuclear weapons, and I got no plans to do it anyway, and you know it. Well, they sign a deal. A couple of years later, the U.S. walks away. Why? Because that was all a fraud. It was always about how can we destroy Iran and steal all of their oil. We're gangsters. We don't make deals. We're thieves. The United States is a government, is a gangster thieving. Did I mention a bunch of degenerates? A bunch of psychotic, depraved degenerates. They have seen files. Well, I'll put it like this: depraved degenerates don't usually make deals, and when they do, they don't keep them, right? So we pushed Iran and told them we were going to do all of these things to them, and the inevitability was at some point, and this is where we are, that Iran would just say enough is enough. That Iran would just say, if somebody pushes you enough, at some point you say, enough is enough. I'm not going to keep groveling at your feet. I'm not going to keep listening to your stinking mouth threaten me. I'm done. And see, I study Zen. And one thing I'll tell you about studying Zen, one of a Zen practice, right? One of the things that a person will do, and I say I don't study Zen from a perspective of Buddhism, but from a perspective of philosophical, like a spiritual philosophy, right? Philosophically, is you picture yourself lying on a bed, and you get older, and you're really, really old, and you're on your deathbed, and family members around, and then you die, and they all walk away, and then you're just a skeleton, and you melt. Then you drop, go back into dust, and there's just an outline of your dust on the bed, and then the windows open, the wind blows and blows your dust out, and that's that, right? It is the coming to grips with your mortality, the realization of mortality. And as you probably know, once you lose the fear of death, there ain't a whole lot else to be afraid of, right? And if you push somebody far enough to the point where they lose the fear of death, then they're ready to fight to the death. They're like, if I'm going to die, I'm going to die now. Today's just as good a day to die as any other day. And I'm not going to live with you giving me hell. We're going to fight it out. And you know what? Even if I die, I know I can make your friggin' life miserable. I know I can make the price so high that you're sorry you're going to do it. So we ain't dealing with Libya. We're not dealing with the Houthis in Yemen. We're not dealing. No. Who are we dealing with? We're dealing with a legitimate world power. In Iran, they are a legitimate world power. Now, legitimate because they have military power and they have the capacity to close down critical shipping lanes that can affect the world's economy. I consider them effectively a world power. So the U.S. is pushing them. So And if the inevitability is that we got cornered by so many things at the same time, that's what's interesting about it. That the US empire was bound to be hung up somewhere, whether it was in Ukraine or Taiwan or South America or back home with another crash or whatever, some scandal, Epstein style scandal, one of these things, you know, a corrupt gangsterish government like we have was bound to get hung up doing something sooner or later. But who the hell thought they'd get hung up doing everything at the same time, right? So here we sit looking at Ukraine, a war that's lost. That is lost. And Trump's like, hey, we're going to talk to Vladimir Putin about getting a deal. A deal? You are the entity who were behind this whole war. The NATO was just kind of like a synonym for the United States military, for the US empire. The US used NATO to do this whole Ukraine thing. Of course, the US, and I would argue in Great Britain, the US and Britain, but you know, 6 in one hand, a half a dozen in the other. The US does a lot of work for Great Britain. So you instigated this war. You are a belligerent. You supply the money, the targeting, the intelligence, all of these things. And now the US is just going to act like they're an intermediator. Hey, you know, we'd like to have a meeting with you and bring all the sides together. Bring all the sides together. You're one of the sides. You are the side. You have provided more money and weapons than anyone else. Joe Biden was the guy who was pretty much the king of Ukraine when he was vice president. He pretty much ran it. So you guys set this thing up, and now you're going to pretend that you are not a co-belligerent, and you think Russia's going to buy that? They ain't. You know why? Because they're winning the war, and because they're going to win the war. So here you are looking at a catastrophic military defeat for NATO, and you got nothing but a bunch of idiots in Europe. Kaja Kallas, Ursula von der Leyen, Macron, Starmer, Merz, fools, absolutely fools running these countries. And they're going broke. They're in deep and serious trouble. You know, Merz has Macron now has an 11% approval rating. In that's in France. That's the prime minister of France. How about Starmer, which he was close, and his numbers are very close. And might I add, he's hanging on to his job by a thread because of the Epstein scandal. And it's all of Europe is in economic peril. We're in bad peril, but worse than us. It's a disaster, an economic disaster area. And you started that war against Russia. The only people that don't know that are the brainwashed people, the brainwashed cult members here. But you started that war against Russia because you wanted to destroy Russia, and the war destroyed you. You pulled the pin on this grenade and you tried to throw the grenade at Russia, and it like stuck to your hand. Here you go. Ha ha ha. Click. Oh no. Boom. And now you said, and if that weren't bad enough, if that wasn't stupid enough, if that was, you've been going after these small countries and you will go after the big one now. And now you're stuck in Ukraine. And as I've said many times, the US empire knows how to lose a war. The US wants to get the hell out of Ukraine. They're trying to, as Andrei Martyanov said, that there's a wagon on fire and they're trying to jump off the wagon. Ain't nowhere to jump. There's nowhere to jump. You're on the wagon and the wagon's on fire. Ukraine is yours, and there's no way not to take an L. The US is trying to get off of Ukraine. They're trying to run because they're about to take an L, and they don't want to take an L. But there ain't no way to get away from that L. It's yours. You own it. You earned it. It's inevitable. Mystery. Now, when we look at Iran, in a way, that's worse. In a way, okay, but they're all bad. But the U.S. is threatening Iran, and the U.S. has convinced the people of the United States that Iran is a weak military power, and that they use this word: "We will strike Iran." Yo, really? You go ahead and strike Iran. You're gonna go in the bar, and there's a Hell's Angels guy. I might strike that motorcycle ruffian. What do you think he's going to do? Just walk away and cry, curl up in the fetal position and suck his thumb? The enemy gets a vote. And you're talking about striking Iran. And now I'm reading I'm reading like the newspapers, and they're like, the president of the United States is preparing for a war for weeks. Weeks? How many wars in history lasted for weeks? In fact, if it lasts for weeks, I ain't calling it a war. And what is Iran saying? Weeks? Hell, if you tangle with us, we're planning on minimum, they've even said that, a war of attrition, minimum 6 to 8 months. Now, we're going to strike Iran. To do what? To change. We're going to attack them when we can only fight for weeks at best. And to get rid of their government or something like that. How does that work in history? When has that ever worked? Where somebody flew over, dropped some bombs, and we can't fly over, I might add, dropped some bombs, and then people were like, okay, I guess the government's over. Let's bring in whoever the US tells us. It doesn't even make any sense. It is completely absurd. So we are threatening Iran, but I think we got to get out of it any way we can, because if the U.S. talks themselves into that, I mean, it's like Lindsey Graham and Tom Cotton and these other lunatics. Yes, enough talking. We've had enough with the mullahs in Iran. It's time for us to go in and teach them a lesson. Teach them a lesson? You know, because it's not in a big way the U.S. military in Ukraine that's getting ground into powder by the Red Army, right? The Red Army is grinding the Ukrainian army into powder, right? A country, this gigantic, it's a big country. The contact line that they're fighting along is like 1,100 miles. It's huge, like from here to Florida, for God's sake, right? And Americans don't realize just how big a war this is. It's gigantic. But the Russians are doing what the Russian army always does, right? And the U.S. is hiding a little bit of that L because they're saying we've got to save the Ukrainians, stop the Ukrainians. The Ukrainians can't win. The Ukrainians can't win? Yeah, that's NATO. And NATO's taking an L. And I don't know how NATO's going to deal with that L, but it's going to take an L. No way to win it. And now they're saying to a country that in its own right, one of the U.S. proxies, Israel, attacked it, and it snubbed that. I mean, they beat the hell out of Israel in 12 days. They pounded Israel. In 12 days, they turned Israel into mincemeat. And just think about this. That was 2 weeks. That's how long the U.S. can fight a war and lose a war, I might add. That's what they're saying. We're going to prepare for 2 weeks like you did before with Israel. And they prepared for 2 weeks. And after 2 weeks, they were running home calling for mommy. Oh, get this crazy person off me. He's going to kick my ass. Luckily, Iran said, okay. But what if Iran said, nah, we will stop. They attacked us. We will stop when they sign an unconditional surrender. And I understand that. If you attack me, that's a fight. Somebody attacks Garland, and they take a swipe at me, and I've slipped that and get in some hits. Pop, pop, pep, pop, pop. Maybe get them a wrist lock. Ooh, oh, and they go down. What are they going to say? Garland, please give me a break. Yeah, that's exactly what I'm going to give you. Boom, I'm breaking that wrist. That's not a submission hold. That's a broken wrist. That's what it is. I don't believe in submission. You should never believe in submission. No, you don't put somebody in an arm bar or something and then say, okay, are you going to say, uncle, when I let you up, are you going to be nice? No, if you get somebody in a situation where you can break their arm, dislocate their elbow, you afflict that injury upon them. And maybe next time when they get ready to grab you, they'll think, ooh, yeah, wait a minute. The last time I ended up I had a cast on my arm for 3 weeks. Not a good idea, right? So I'm thinking Iran has been down that road where like, okay, we gave you a break last time, didn't we? You said, can you please call off the dogs? And we said, okay, if you'll stop shooting, we'll stop shooting. And what'd you do? What'd you do? 6 months later, you're back. Let's get them again. So what Iran's saying is, not this time. Ain't gonna be no dogs called off. If you throw, and Iran's saying it, there ain't, look, we pulled our punches last time. We got a lot more missiles. We got a lot more things that we can do. But you're saying that you're going to come in. Basically, what the U.S. is saying is we'll come in and kill you. And they're saying, oh, really? So that's how it's going to fight. Well, since you said that you're going to destroy our country, we're going to fight you like we were fighting somebody that would try to destroy our country. That's how we're going to fight you. We're going to fight you as though it's an existential, because it is. And of course, we've got friends and low friends in high places in Yemen now. And they've even said, Yemen has some more toys for you. The last time you went up against Yemen, Yemen used their old stuff. We gave Yemen some new toys. So if you want to fool with Yemen this time, you're going to deal with some new toys that they didn't have before. Some little surprises. You may be surprised what Yemen has this time that they didn't have before. They got some goodies for you. And you've got Hezbollah, you've got these PMUs in militias in Iraq, and lots of them, and who knows where else that they've been arming people, where there's bases, where they're saying this time we're going to sneak up on you. We're going to hit you where you're not looking. We're going to punch you where you're not expecting it. We're going to sneak up behind you in the dark and hit you in the head. As Ho Chi Minh said, we'll jump out of the jungle, we'll strike you like the tiger, and we'll go back into the jungle. We'll decide where the front is. We'll decide where to hit you, where not to hit you. You won't. 2 weeks? I don't think so. You're too weak. You'll be too weak by the time we get finished. So now Uncle Sam has to make a decision. We told Iran, you better do what we tell you to do or else. And Iran said no. And then we said, well, we're going to give you some demands. And you better take those demands. and I like what Iran said. They said, okay, on the missiles, yeah, no, forget that. That's not going to happen. On our, what was the other one? On the US said that they had to stop supplying their allies, and they had to drop all their allies in the area. And Iran's like, yeah, that's not happening, dude. Just so you can forget that one. And then Iran said, on the nuclear stuff, we are willing to talk to you about that. Not a problem. We don't want nuclear weapons. So what the hell? We're willing to talk to you about that. But you're going to have to drop all of the sanctions. Not some of the sanctions, not most of the sanctions, not one or two of the sanctions. You're going to have to drop all of the sanctions. So what did Iran effectively do? They did to the US what the US did to them. The US gave them a deal that they couldn't accept. And in return, they said, well, okay, since we've done that, here's an idea. We'll do the same to you. Here's a deal you can't accept. Because Donald Trump, you know damn good and well, you can't go back to Washington and say, we're going to drop all the sanctions, or they'll run you out of the city. So you got to drop all the sanctions. Now, what you going to do? You're cornered. You want this fight? And if you take a swipe at us, we'll end your career. And I think there's a couple of things here. That's why I say the US is cornered, Trump is cornered. If Trump does that, what Iran is saying is, we will end your career. Now, we understand that you have, probably Israel saying we got all kind of Epstein videos that we'll release. We understand that we have members of the Senate probably saying, Trump, if you don't attack Iran, we'll do this or that. We'll impeach you. We won't help you the midterm, whatever the hell, that there's all kind of threats coming. But what Iran is saying is, but if you take a punch at us, all of the rest of that stuff is irrelevant. We will end your career. We will hit you so hard. What happens when the young Americans start coming home dead? And everybody looks at you and says, you told us that you were going to be the president of peace, and you weren't going to get entangled in foreign wars, and you attacked the country, and they knocked the hell out of us. We got a lot of ships out there. And Iran is saying, literally, the Ayatollah Khomeini, which is their spiritual leader of the country, the Grand Ayatollah, gave a speech. I was watching the speech earlier, and it had, they had the words across the bottom. I can't speak Farsi, but he said, you guys got aircraft carriers, and you keep saying you have ships. We will sink those ships. Those ships are good and they're strong. They can be sunk, and we'll see. He's saying we will sink them, and I believe it, because there's some nasty missiles out there nowadays. And there was a time, here's the reality. There was a time when an aircraft carrier was a dominant thing. Because what is an aircraft carrier? It is a mobile base. It is a base that you can send all over the world. And that base has all of these airplanes, and the planes can go up and they can attack you. But the aircraft carrier has to be able to defend itself because it's a very large target and it's got all kinds of ships around it. And their job is to defend and protect the aircraft carrier. They call it a carrier strike group, right? And each of them, it's the George W. Bush aircraft carrier strike group, and they got X amount of ships around them, and they got subs in the area, and their job is to protect the aircraft carrier. But there are missiles now that are so effective, that fly so fast and move all over the place in their terminal mission, just before they hit the aircraft carrier, they go all over the place, that the US doesn't have the technology to stop the missiles. And even if it could stop one, they're going to fire a salvo. I don't know how much you know about missiles and salvos, but if you're going to fire, let's say you've got a ship and I'm firing a missile at it. There's a mathematical formula. If I fire one missile at it, you have missile defense. So let's say if I fire one missile, the odds are 30% that I'll hit it. If I fire two missiles, it makes it more difficult. Now the odds might be 65%. What happens is it gets to a number, let's say 6, 7, 8 missiles, 12 missiles, whatever the number of missiles is, or that if I fire that many missiles at you, I've got like a 99% chance. There's a certain number of missiles that makes it almost inevitable that one of them is going to hit. At least one of them is going to hit. But then the others still have their 60 or 40 or whatever percent chance, 30 minimal, right? So if I fire 10 or 12 missiles at you, the odds are you're going to get hit by a few of them, not just one, which at that point means your ship is going to sink because it's going to be hit. Some of these missiles, one of them will sink you. These are nasty missiles, right? With a lot of speed, and a missile coming in at 3,000 miles an hour with, a couple 100 pounds of TNT. The kinetic energy is overwhelming. Your ship's going down, and all of these people want it. What happens? That's the thing about it. Where is the U.S. empire? The U.S. empire now has cornered itself by going after Iran. See, it's like this, as when we talk about self-defense, you are, the first thing you'll be taught is to punch, a strike. Anyone, your strike comes out, get it back, pull it back. Boom. You'll ever see anybody who's, a boxers, right? They're boxing, right? What does it do? You'll see the box come right back. Boom, it's going to come right back. Anything you throw out, it's going to come right back. Why? Because when you punch is when you're vulnerable. When you attack, when you do anything, that's when you are vulnerable. If you miss, if the person traps it, if they catch your hand or arm or whatever, they twist it, they bend it, they snap it, you're in a world of trouble. They can guide you. They get your arm and your shoulder goes this way or that way, your whole body goes, right? When you strike, when you attack is when you're most vulnerable. A good counterattack. You sit there and wait for you to throw a punch, wait for you to do whatever. And the big guy who just wants to lumber in and throw this big roundhouse haymaker. But what happens if he misses? Oh, look at this here. He's missed it. Now, number one, it's coming in like this, so you could easily just step right into that. You can step right into that. And that arm ain't going no further. And look at it, everything's open. Everything is there. Oh, man, that fight ends quick if somebody knows what they're doing, right? So my point being is the stupid guy is the guy that throws the punches because he's vulnerable. Now, what are we doing? We're going to Iran's area of the world where they know every crook and nook and cranny, where they know the water, they know the distances, they know the coves, they know the mountains, they know the terrain, and they've got all of their stuff set up and mapped out, everything, where everything might be and how far they have to, these ships have to be to shoot, and when the planes are in range, and they got it all mapped out. They live there. They've been planning that. I'm not saying that the U.S. doesn't, but we don't live there. And did I mention they ain't going nowhere because they live there? And you're going to go to the spider's lair and fight him where he has all of the advantages. Not a good look. It ain't going to work out well for you. So my point is the U.S. has bullied Iran, and now guess what? We got what we want. We are going to we want to get bully Iran and we want to set them up and we want to take them out. Good news. You got what you want. You got Iran cornered. You got ships all around them, stubs, Tomahawk missiles, airplanes, everything you want. But what happens when you throw the first punch? Hit or miss. When you throw a punch, everything's just sitting there for them to hit. Right, all up and down there. Eyes, nose, throat, jaw, you name it. Whatever they want to smack, buddy, they can do a number on you. You get the first punch, they're waiting. But see, they've got long range radar. So when you fire something, whatever it is, first of all, your ship's got to be like 1,000 kilometers away to stop from getting sunk. That should be a hit that maybe you shouldn't. When you have to park your aircraft carriers 1,000 miles from Iran because you're afraid of Iran's anti-ship missiles, that's kind of a hit. You probably shouldn't screw with Iran. So now you fire these Tomahawks from God only knows 500. Let's say you come in 500, your planes come in within 500 kilometers and they fire the missile. In Iran's, they got all this early warning radar and everything, and they see them coming. You know, they're number one, they've got air defense, so they'll be able to shoot some of them down. Who knows how many? But number two, and they let loose on you. What happens? You got air bases, and they let loose on those air bases, and they ain't screwing around this time. Just like they said, they let loose with intermediate range missiles on those air bases, and they just pepper those air bases that you have in the Middle East nonstop. You've got ports in the Middle East where you got Navy ships. They just pepper those things with missiles, intermediate range missiles by the thousands. They turn your. Where are you? Where you gonna fly out of now? And they have the distance. I mean, they could technically, they have ships that could, I mean, they have missiles that could hit the bases in Europe. That's the kind of distance they got with them. So they can hit you wherever they want to hit you. They can get you where they want to get you. But what happens if they got some surprises for you? Some of your bases in other parts of the world could be hit. They got a lot of power. They can do asymmetric things. And of course, you know, they do have some powerful friends in Russia and China. And the word out everywhere is that Russia and China have been providing them with significant capabilities. So what happens if you go into Iran and they hit you with some cyber attacks? Usually the U.S. hits this country with some cyber attacks. But what happens if they smack the daylights out of the U.S. with some nasty cyber attacks that, oh, I don't know, they got from China or Russia? You think China and Russia don't have some cyber attacks? So they launch cyber attacks against you. They do some of the same things that you're used to doing. Why? Because they have access to their technology, but they also have access to technology from China and Russia. Oh, by the way, I don't know if you know this, China has been putting out these satellite photos, right? Let me find it. China. Let me see if I can get some. I don't see any. They have been putting out satellite photos of US bases in the Middle East. And let me see. Let me find some of them. It's hard to find them right now when you're looking for them, but this might be it. Whatever the case may be, they're hard to find. But Chinese, what the Chinese has been doing is taking satellite photos of US bases in the Middle East and releasing them all over the place, and just letting the US know Iran's our friend. And they'll have like little thick diagrams to show where planes are. They'll have little diagrams to show where the air defense systems, all of this kind of stuff. And they're just releasing them out in commercial. I mean, you know, out into the ether, out on X and everywhere else, right? Which means that all of that targeting information, look, if they're releasing it, that's a message to you. What they're saying is this: you know um, we're giving everything to China, to Iran, that Iran has all the perfect targeting information for you. Now, here's what I'm thinking too. If I'm China, US has like a third of their ships all in one place, all at the same time. And they want to threaten me with those ships. Those ships want to go to the Pacific region and threaten me over Taiwan and threaten me over other things. That's what they want to do with those ships. And there's a third of them just sitting there looking pretty. Be a shame if something happened to those ships. Well, gee, they wouldn't be able to bring them back to the Pacific and threaten me with them if they were to meet an unfortunate and untimely demise. We would not we want that to happen. I'm just saying, if let's just say what is the let's see, there's the Chinese carrier, they call it the carrier killer missile. Where is it? So the DF-21D, let's look at some pictures. This is, there we go, military hardware. What the hell? Built to sink aircraft carriers, Chinese DF-21D missile is a game changer, right? They call their carrier killer, anti-ship ballistic missile. It's word U.S. naval strategists for years. U.S. Navy prepared to be rocked by the DF-21D. There we go. Does this mean the Chinese have the upper hand in denying access to sea lanes and reducing the efficacy of maritime patrols by the U.S. Navy in East Asia? It certainly looks that way, particularly with anti-ship missiles like China's DF-21D. Can we get this crap? The missiles were so the Aegis system. We'll see. China has more expertise with missiles, with anti-ship missiles. So you go on. Combat range of 2,140 kilometers, 35 feet long, diameter 4.6 feet, a 1,322 pound payload. So here's my point. Iran has anti-ship missiles, but if I'm China and I'm already helping Iran, and I'm looking at a bunch of US ships looking nice, plump, and ripe and ready to be picked, and I know that when they leave that area, they're probably going to head back over to the South China Sea so they can harass me. But I don't want them to do that now, do I? I'd prefer that they stay where they are and become a fishing reef. So what do? Well, you got there, Iran. Well, we've got some pretty good missiles. Are they better than the DF-21D carrier killer? Well, no, but they're pretty good. Tell you what I'm going to do. We'll just paint like some Islamic Republic flag on the side of this missile, and we'll call it the whatever the hell you call your missiles, the Shaheed 3 or something like that. Okay. We're going to paint something on this missile that says it ain't Chinese, but it's a pretty nasty carrier killer missile. Wouldn't you like a whole bunch of them? In fact, our guys will be happy to come help you fire them. We'll have some special forces guys there. They'll fire these missiles. We'll target them in for you, and you just fire them at these ships. And guess what? Fire and forget. You fire them, they home in on the ships themselves. They come in with the hypersonic speeds, and poof. How many ships they got out there? Oh, I think they got 30 or 40 ships. Yeah, I think we can come up with 4 or 5 missiles per ship. What do you think? What do you think there, Bill? You got 4 or 5 missiles per ship? It's an old Bill, which is not a Chinese name, but you get the point. Yes, sir, boss. I can come up with 4 or 5 missiles per ship. I talked to Bill. Bill's going to take care of you. He's going to deliver something for you. We'll have some special forces guys there on the coast. If the Americans so much as throw a rock at you, guess what we're going to do? If you're okay with it, our special forces guys will be sure to have a nice little missile. So none of those ships will ever make their way back. You okay with that? And of course, the Iranians, what the hell? The United States has said, we are going to destroy Iran. What do you think the Iranians are going to do? Pull their punches? They said they're going to destroy you. You got one option. And you know what that is? You destroy them first. If somebody says, I'm going to destroy you, Garland, well, I got to destroy you first. That's my only option, right? So my point being, if I'm, and same with Russia. Yeah, you know, they got the Onyx P800, right? And the latest version is 1,000 kilometers. I'm just saying, they probably have a version that's probably further that they're not telling us about. What you got, Iran? Let me see. If it ain't better than this, here, take a couple dozen of these. Just throw them all at these Americans. Yeah, throw some Chinese missiles, some Russians. We'll make like a, we'll make like the soup that your mom made when you were a kid. You know, when she had some leftover chicken and this and that and a gumbo, and she threw it all in the pot and she made a soup of all different kind of things. That was a delicious soup in the winter. That's what we're going to do for the Americans. We got some Dongfeng 21s here. We got some P800 Onyxes here. You know what we're going to do? What the hell? Our special forces will fire the P800 Onyx. They already know how to fire it anyway from because they have them in Iran. So the American ships are out there, and we will fire the first Tomahawk that comes this way. We're going to send so many missiles at them ships that they ain't going to fire a second one. Not those ships. Some other ships may come from another part of the world. Let's hope. And the Chinese are probably like, and let's hope they do. In fact, we'll call the Americans, oh, darn. Oh, my God. A terrible tragedy. Iran sunk all your ships. You better send more. Send your best ones, all of them. Go get those stinking Iranians. Don't let them get away with that crap. That's what the Russians, that's what they did. I thought it was the Chinese. More ships, straight to Davy Jones' locker. Wouldn't you if you were China? China's waiting for you to attack them. What are you trying to do? We've got to go. We've got to take out Iran. Why? Because they sell oil to China, and then we'll cut off all China's oil. I don't think I'd like that if I was China. In fact, I would not like that so much that I would arm Iran to the teeth, and they've already armed themselves to the teeth. So I guess I'd arm them to the toes, to the hairline, to everything. I would make sure that everything they need. And did I mention that Russians might have a bone to pick with you too, because you keep coming up to their border screwing with them. So I'm just saying, the United States is not only in a corner, they are presenting an opportunity. The kind of opportunity that somebody presents when they don't know what they're doing and they reach out to grab you in the collar. Let me tell you something, buddy. And they grab you in the collar. They're presenting an opportunity that they just don't know that they're presenting. Oh, that arm's going to get broke. All kind of terrible things are going to happen to them. They just don't know it because they're a tough guy and they reached out and they got you now. Oh, boy. That's all going to it's going to end up real bad for them. Really, really bad. It's going to be a difficult position for them. When they get finished, they're going to say to themselves, you know, perhaps that was not the best decision that I've ever made. You know, my arm's dislocated. How'd that happen? I've been kicked in the groin. I can't see. I got detached retinas. My throat's mushed. My jaw's broke. This is a bad situation. Blood's running out of everywhere. How'd this happen? My eardrums are clapped. Somebody clapped my stinking ears. I mean, this is a bad day. You reached out and you grabbed that person and you presented to them, little did you know, you presented to them a tremendous opportunity for growth. They can practice all the things that they've been learning all of these many years on you. So my point is, the U.S. is presenting an opportunity for Russia and China and Iran. And they're cornered. And let me add this. At a time, as Andre Martyanov always says, and if that's not enough, the American people are looking at the Epstein files saying, you got to be freaking kidding me. What? They did what? Our so-called leaders did what with who? And ate who? They ate people? What? That's what Americans are like. Did I just read something that said they ate somebody? No, I don't believe that. Yeah, well, that's out. So the degeneracy of these lunatics is out. They have lost the institutions of power, have lost all credibility. And Americans are looking at them like, what in the world's going on here? And here we sit. Oh, by the way, did I mention they've made complete monkeys out of themselves? They sent Pam Blondie out and didn't go well. I think I'll be kind to old Pam Blondie. It didn't go well. She went before Congress and she pointed at him and she yelled and she talked about illegal immigrants and she attacked the people who were questioning her. And people looked and they were like, oh my God, it's far worse than we thought. Not only have they done terrible things, not only is she covering them up, she has the intellect of a bag of cabbage. She's about as bright as a as a wet match in a dark cave. She's really not real bright. If you were smart, you'd have to have more sense than that. Oh, did I mention that at the same time, the all support for Israel is completely collapsing in the United States? Erica Kirk, people are kind of figuring out that there's something real fishy about this Turning Point USA thing. And we're in the midterms. What a time to be alive. What do you think? What a hell of a time to be alive. You know what that sound is? That's the sound of inevitability, Mr. Anderson. You know what that sound is, Mr. Anderson? It is the sound of inevitability. And anybody that looks at this and says, oh my God, isn't this something? Isn't this amazing? What had to happen for all this to happen? You know, here's the reality. Go back to my Zen. Not only is this happening, there's no way it couldn't. It was inevitable. The way the US has been living, let me say this, you know, not to get too metaphysical here, but the US has been doing this crap for hundreds of years. This is a country that has, and not the people of the country, the people have been victims of the ruling elite. And the people are starting to find out just how degenerate the ruling elite, but the people have been victims of the ruling elite for I don't know how long. And we had a small period there, say 1950s, 60s, 70s, about that 30-year period where things were going well. In the 80s, it started going downhill. Before the 30s, you know, I mean, it was bad. For most people were poor, and there was some middle class, but not much of a middle class. And we had the industrial revolution, and they had working people and child labor, and you know the ruling elite were doing all kinds of terrible things. And then in the 30s, you know, we had 40s, we had the war, and then you had the post-war boom, and you had a lot of organized labor that, you know, forced a lot of things on the owners of labor that they didn't want to do. And you ended up with a pretty strong middle class for 30 or 40 years. And the ruling elite wasn't having that. They weren't going to have a strong middle class. No thanks. That's a threat to them. And they wiped out the middle class. They wiped out all the New Deal stuff that was there to keep Glass-Steagall, to keep the banks from going berserk. They got rid of all of that stuff. They completely bought the government, So there's not even an illusion of democracy anymore. And here we sit, a place where we eventually were going to end up at some point. And here they sit, woofing at Iran, losing a catastrophic war, a catastrophic loss, which will completely obliterate NATO in Ukraine, and picking on Iran, caught in a corner, and Trump's damned if he does and damned if he doesn't. If he doesn't, his neocons and all of his donors are going to go bananas. You didn't attack him, we're mad. If he does, he's finished. If he attacks Iran, I think he's finished. If he attacks Iran, then where will the US be? What happens if, I mean, what he's gambling, if he attacks Iran, what happens if we lose the war? You know, we did have a, I think it was Operation Millennium Challenge, 2002, 2003. Look it up. The US did a mock war against Iran and lost in hours. They were in this war game, in hours they were defeated. Well, what happens if we go up against Iran and the potential is there? We could be defeated, or we could inflict some pain and they could inflict some pain. I don't know, but I put it like this. They can surely inflict some pain. You ain't going to stop them from launching a lot of missiles at a lot of bases in a lot of places, and we don't have, I mean, and a lot of drones and a lot of stuff, and they have some submarines and they got some underwater drones and they got a lot of things, and you don't know what they've been provided by Russia and China. You may find yourself overwhelmed with technology that you had no idea they had. You may look at it and say, wait, whoa, how'd they get that? What is this? The DF-21D, carrier killer missiles. How'd that happen? Our carrier's been killed. You want to take that chance? Donald Trump, the first president to lose a carrier or two or three and get his, we got a whole armada there. In this day and age, with the accuracy and the power and the speed of anti-ship missiles, and a so-called armada is a bunch of sitting ducks sitting on the water. These are big ships sitting out on the water. And with the speed and power, what happens? You got a ship and there's underwater drones coming at you, torpedoes coming at you, aerial drones coming at you, and missiles at the same time. Something's going to get home, brother. Something's going to reach you. And when it does, you're not going to have a pleasant day. We will lose ships if we, I suspect, I don't know anything, but I suspect we lose ships. I suspect we lose a lot of people. And then what? Well, we've lost a lot of people in some ships, but we only got enough air defense for 2 weeks. So we'll just do a 2-week thing. What do you think? You're going to do a draft here and declare war? They've burned this country down. You think they're going to be like, yes, the people who are a bunch of, pedos and they're eating people and things of that nature, trafficking children. Yes, sirree. We'll be drafted to fight for them and stand up for Israel. That's not going to work. So my point being, U.S. has cornered itself, but it was inevitable, Mr. Anderson. It was inevitable. What we're looking at right now, what we're listening to with Iran, what we're looking at and listening to in Ukraine is the sound of inevitability. Being a bully, being a gangster, criminal, going around the world, stealing everything, forcing everybody against their will to do what we wanted to do, want them to do, whether they wanted it or not, overthrowing their governments, killing them, killing civilians, genociding people. It's a matter of time. It was just a matter of time before that came home. And now here we sit, waiting to see, will Donald Trump make that? Well, first of all, we didn't know if Trump had the authority to make the decision. Will the decision be made to enter into a war with a country who has the capacity to hit back and you don't even know how hard? Not a good idea. Okay, thanks a lot, everybody. Thanks for all my Patreon and PayPal and buy me a coffee and all that stuff. The people who donate and keep this channel going, I appreciate that very, very much. They keep me in Chesapeake outdoor hats and flannel shirts. How about that, right? Thank you very much. I got a new hat coming out and I'm going to be selling it. And I think you're going to find it neat. I got a hat coming out and I'm going to be selling my hat. It's going to be available and nobody else has a hat like this. It is my own idea. And I think it's pretty funny. I think it's going to be a good hat. So hopefully people get the hat for my merch. I got a merch store. In fact, my merch store is up, for God's sake. I forgot to put it in. I'm going to put my merch store from now on in the what do you call it? Show notes. That's it. And all that stuff. So, but I got my hats on there. So we'll see if people like it, if people want to buy it, and some of the other stuff at the old merch store. So thanks, everybody. Oh, by the way, additionally, I do have a P.O. box. So if anybody wants to send me anything, a letter, a card, a donation, you name it, there's the P.O. box. You can do the snail mail. Thanks a lot, everybody. Have a wonderful day. Share this on all your social media platforms. That is the sound of inevitability. Mr. Anderson, I'm out.